welcome to another geography lesson. Today we're going to look at economic geography. So basically what we're going to concentrate on is what do we do that builds South Africa's economics. And obviously we practice primary activities and secondary activities and tertiary activities. And where do most of the people, where do we generate our income in South Africa? But before I'm going to continue with economic geography, I want you to pay attention to the concepts and the following definitions. Now, it's quite important for this section that you need to be able to understand what we're talking about and what we're referring to. Now, if you look at the concepts, for instance, balance of payment, what does it mean? It's financial statements and it's transactions between the rest of the world. It's basically if you buy something and you sell something. If you look at the balance of trade, very importantly, it's the value of exports minus the value of imports. Now, it's very important, every single country strives to have a positive balance of trade. So what is a positive balance of trade? Basically, for a country to be well developed and economically very strong, you want to export more than import. So we want to sell more products than buying more products from other countries. So that makes a very good balance of trade. British industries is usually industries that's located between raw materials and the customer. For instance, if you look at raw materials, for instance, oil, that's being from, let's say, for instance, the oil refineries that we get off the coast of Namibia, for instance, and then where it's being manufactured at BP or at Sasol or coal industries, for example. Now, centralization, now we've looked at it in our previous section when we look at urban settlements. Centralization is when the movement of industries to a core area. And later on in the next episode, we're definitely going to look at our main industrial hubs. Decentralization is moving away from these centralized areas. The simple reason why is because it might be too congested and there might be too many activities taking place. So what do some of the industries do? They relocate to different areas. Now, the economic activities, that's kind of self-explanatory, is what we practice to make a living. So what type of economic activities do we practice in our country so that we can provide people in South Africa with jobs? Now, exports is the goods and services. So what we basically do, we sell what we make in this country to other countries. Best example possible is the wine we make in the Western Cape. What do we do with the wine? We usually ship it to European countries. Same with our fruit and veg. Now, a favorable trade balance, like I've mentioned, is when our exports exceeds the imports. Is when we sell more products to other countries that we buy from other countries. So that's what we want to do. We rather want to sell more. We want to manufacture in our country, and then we want to sell it to other countries. Unfortunately, in South Africa, what we basically do is we take that raw material and we ship it off to China, and then we buy it back. So in the perfect world, to be a developed country, we take our raw materials, we manufacture it, and then we sell it. Instead, what do? We ship the raw materials off to China, to other countries, and then we buy back the final product. Now, food insecurity and food security we did discuss in the previous lessons, but if you quickly look at the definitions for it, food insecurity means that you don't have your daily calorie intake. You don't have enough food to survive for a healthy and productive life. Food security is when you do have enough food and you can have a healthy and productive lifestyle. Now, if you look at the following concept, footloose industries. Now, basically, this is an industry or business. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need the site of a location. It doesn't require water, resources, or transport. It can be anywhere. For instance, computer chip manufacturing or diamond processing. It can be anywhere. You don't need to be close to transport areas, and you don't need to be close to the consumers. Foreign exchange. Now, you will notice this every single night in the news. When they discuss business, they usually talk about foreign exchange as the type of different currencies that the world work with. Now, if you look at South Africa, they always use the pound and the dollar and the exchange rate to see the price of goods and services. So unfortunately, when a country is well developed, their currency is much stronger. So that means we have to pay more for the product. Now, the formal sector is basically what you see as businesses registered to pay tax. Now, obviously, it's very important to be registered because these tax money that they collect provides us with services like hospitals, transport roads, networks, and schools. Globalization, you've learned about that in grade 10. Once again, if you look at it, it's the economic, social, political, and cultural activities of countries across the world that are interconnected. Now, globalization, for example, is McDonald's. It's an American company, but it's everywhere. Apple iPhones, not only in America, it's everywhere. Nike shoes, globalization. Big companies like Procter & Gamble. So they've got offices over there, they've got offices in America, offices in England. Same as KPMG. Now, these two terms are quite important and you need to be able to know them very well and know the difference between the two. The GDP is all the goods and services produced within the borders of a country. So that's me working in South Africa. If I sell a product, that's the GDP, the money being made obviously in the formal sector, they're obviously paying tax and the country makes money. Or service that I deliver, for instance, building roads, it's everything inside the borders of the country. But gross national product is basically outside the borders. If you look at the definition, is the total value of goods and services produced by the permanent citizens of a country in 1 year. Note that permanent citizens may work out of the country. So that involves South Africans that works in England, Australia, or maybe work in the mining sectors up in Africa. So that includes everyone. Now keep in mind, there's many South African citizens abroad working over there. And that is the GNP, the money being made right over outside South Africa as well. Now a hawker is basically an informal street trader. We're going to discuss this section a bit later. The informal sector, usually they don't pay tax, they're not registered to pay tax. So that's the guy next to the road selling loose draw cigarettes, cool drinks, etc. Industrial development zones, the IDZs, we're going to have a look at that also in our next lesson. It's basically industrial estates that promotes economical growth. It's very important to promote economical growth because what do we want to do? We want to provide people with jobs. And we don't want unemployment to rise, rather have people to have jobs. And obviously with people with jobs, it means the country makes more money. Now the informal sector, like I've mentioned a couple of seconds ago, is usually small unregistered businesses. Now we're going to have a look at this in detail in the next lesson. Infrastructure, this is transport networks, roads, railways, services like electricity, water and sewage. We need this. That's the reason we pay tax. We need water, we need electricity. For a company to be productive, we need electricity. And that's the reason we pay tax. Now, we've looked at this before, the primary activities, and we're going to discuss this economic activities. That's farming, fishing, and mining. South Africa's two main primary activities is mining and farming, can be livestock or crops. Quaternary activities deals with research and information. If you look at secondary activities, we discussed it in the previous section as well. It's basically where manufacturing and processing is taking place. Now we've got different sets of labor in South Africa. Our first one is a semi-skilled worker, usually just do routine tasks. Someone who's not skilled or trained to do a specialized work. If you look at skills worker, it's usually people who's got a tertiary education or has got some sort of diploma or training behind it. So they can specify and they can specialize in a certain job because they require the knowledge to do it. If you look at the Spatial Development Initiative, now this is another program that the government tries to implement. Now what it basically does, it improves infrastructure and attract businesses. So what we want to do, we want to grow economically, make more money, and give people opportunity to be employed, especially in rural areas. Because what happens, we looked at it, what happens in the rural areas, everyone moves to the urban areas. And we want to stop this migration taking place. So we need to come up with initiatives to keep people in rural areas and how people can make money over there. Tertiary activities, like we've mentioned, is services, like the banks, trade and transport, schools, hospitals, etc. A trading bloc is a group of countries that have common markets or trade agreements with one another. And an unskilled worker is just someone who do simple duties and don't have any specific skill. And for instance, physical labor, or basically a gardener, or is unqualified, or has got no qualifications to do a certain job. But in this lesson, like I've mentioned, we're going to look at the primary economic activities. Now, primary economic activities, if you look at the definition before, is basically extracting raw materials from the earth. For example, farming, fishing, and mining, forestry as well. But two of our main primary economic activities that boost South Africa's GDP is farming and mining. Now, South Africa is quite renowned for mining. If you think of all the gold, I mean, Johannesburg is known as the city of gold. Many settlers settled, and that's the reason why Johannesburg developed, is because they found gold over here. But before that, Kimberley was also one of the first settlements where diamond mining took place. And farming plays a vital role in South Africa because we make money of it and it provides people with food in this country. So those two are the most important primary economic activities in South Africa. Now, if you look at farming, we already discussed it. In our previous lessons, when we look at rural areas, that's mostly where farming taking place. Now, we got subsistence farming and commercial farming. Very importantly over here, Gr12s, if you can remember, commercial farming is making a profit, making money. So we've got extensive and intensive farming taking place as the farmer plants his crops, not to use for his own use, but to sell it to make money. Now, for instance, in the case in the Western Cape, for example, farming of grapes, what do? They process it over there as well. And what do they do with their products? Make wine of it and usually ship overseas. And that's obviously very good for the country because it increases our exports. We can make more money because of the difference in currency. Our farmers can get paid more over there than locally. Now, if you look at farming, we've got stock farming, crop farming. So I'm talking maize over here. Stock farming, I'm talking cattle or sheep. And mixed farming, many farmers do practices both crops and stock because they can use the crops to feed their stock. Now, if you quickly look at it, we've got small scale and large scale farmers over here. If we just quickly look at the explanation of small scale farmers, with limited resources, as hobby farmers or retirement farmers, lifestyle farmers, they sell directly to the consumers through farmer markets. Those who grow vegetables or fruit will also raising livestock. Now, if you look at large-scale farmers, and that's mostly your commercial farmers. Now, obviously, they use the optimal size of the business enterprise and obviously try to make as much profit as well. Now, the other type of farming that we did discuss is subsistence farming. Now, if you look at subsistence farming, it's basically farming for yourself to provide your needs for your own family. Now, if you look at subsistence farming taking place, it's usually they've got crop, they've got cattle, and that is just to provide themselves with food. Now, in South Africa, we've got a couple of factors that helps us promoting farming in South Africa. And the reason why I'm saying promoting is because it provides an income for people and it provides for the people to be productive and profitable. Now, if you look at the first one, all of us do need to eat. So there's a very high demand, means people need these products to stay alive. And it's so much better if we can do it locally than have to import food from different areas. So there's a massive demand for farming products. Everyone needs it in their lives. Either you're a vegetarian or not, you need the crops that our farmers farm. So it doesn't matter, it will always be profitable because people need to eat. Now, so if you look at it, farmers' profit rise when they can sell for a higher price to overseas markets, like I explained it to you, especially the wine industry. But not only is it important for exports, but it's also important to the local community, the local population of Southern Africa. Now, if you look at the wine industry, for example, many people, for instance, the farmers that farm their grapes over there, what do they do with the grapes? They basically process it, change it into wine, and sell it for a higher price, for instance, in European countries like England. And if you look at the exchange rate, for example, £1 is almost 18 Rand. So that farmer makes more money, and because it's a formal business, it means the GDP increases, and it means our country makes more money. After the break, we're going to continue with factors promoting farming.